So because we're pre-cutting each step and the dimensions, all right, so it's a helpful hint, so you don't get confused, is to put numbers to the riser and to the stair tread, and that'll correspond to the back of the riser, and then as we cut, we'll label each one. So we'll do the measurement, we'll cut, and you'll see that as we progress. All right, so now that we're all prepped, squared off, have the nosing cut so it's flush, and we'll come in. By the way, the floor, this would represent the landing with the flooring on the first floor or second floor, have it. We'll do a rough cut. All right, so we know it's around 35. We'll make it 36 inches to make it easy to handle. This mock-up, we're going to install the riser first. And there's an option to go the other way, but in this case we're going to do that. So to do that, we have the risers off. We'll pre-cut our nosing. We'll mark a line down there, a pencil line. And now we can get a measurement to get a rough cut for now. Okay, so there's 9 inches. So we'll rough cut our now pre-cut length pieces. We will pre-cut those to be rough, and then we can just start installing the risers, and then it'll go kind of quickly after that. So let's put our Stepnose. We have a riser, and for video purposes we have not glued that yet. And we want to check because these steps have to be out a little bit, so they're a little bit out of square. So what we're going to do is cut this tread just a little bit long. We'll do the measurement. Okay, and it looks like I'd say 34 7/8 on the front. Okay, 34 7/8 on the front. And I got, let me see, 34 15/16 on the back. On the back. And we'll cut that 34 15/16, and then we'll scribe it, but we'll get to that. Right now it looks like we're 8 7/8, so we'll give it just a little bit to play with, but that'll bring it nice and tight. So we'll say 8 7/8 deep. Okay, so we're going to allow for that groove side. We determined it was going to be a 3.5 inch piece that we cut, and this will all come together. You can go ahead and start installing, put it on the glue, but just by taking the seam sealer Mannington MSS 20, and we feel like this step in the long run will say just put a little bit down in the groove. You do this to all, and now you've made the double planks into one single plank. This will make things a little easier gluing down the road and cutting. Okay, set that aside. That's for the riser, and this is for the tread. Same thing, and it doesn't take a lot. You can run it down there pretty quickly. All right, that'll keep it. Okay, so as you can see, this is now the second one. This is for 2R, meaning the second riser. All right, we already put seam sealer in the other two, so they're setting up now. They'll be ready to cut. We'll do the same thing. As you can see, we flip over, run a little bead of seam sealer, and put it together. Give it 10-15 minutes, and that'll become one plank. Okay, so while we're waiting for the tread and risers to set up the seam sealer the next couple of minutes, we want to get a measurement, and we can cut the nosy. Okay, so now we're ready to measure the riser. We'll double check. Yep, 34. We'll write that on here, and then we'll make that cut. Okay, so now I want to get my riser depth, which looks like 6 3/8, and we can deal with that. You'll notice I put some up arrows on here, some directional key marks to help me out there. Okay, so once I have this measurement here, 6 3/8. I set the saw on a little bit of a back bevel. That'll make the surface a little longer than the back. Set that saw to 6 3/8. Run it off of here. Do a little fit test. Okay, that's just about right for glue. Everything's tight, so we feel good about that. Now I'm going to measure that when I need the 7/8, 8 7/8 on the angle. And if you'll notice, I have a back bevel. That'll make it kind of make a nice fit right there in the when it meets the riser. Okay, so now we have everything cut that we need. So we'll start taking this back, unassembling. Seam sealer or PVC pipe cement will work just as well if that's what they have in hand, but you're basically going to now attach this shim, and this will give it the rise to be able to have that underslung set on top to allow your expansion. So we're basically going to put that on there and let that take a hold. Once that does that, that'll become one piece. So now we can apply the B88 adhesive. Okay, you can use a small spatula similar to this, or you can use a regular 1/16. 1/32 would be fine even, but I like a little more on there just to give you a little more play. You don't have to worry about for the nosing. We're going to use a urethane adhesive to give it the added strength that it needs. This here will take care of the steps and the treads. Okay. Alright, so once we have the adhesive spread, you can allow it to flash off a little bit, but really if it's wood subfloor like this and not cement, it's actually okay to go in wet. We're going to start with the first riser. Sure it's nice and even right there. Okay, so we go with the tread, fit that right in there nice and tight. If you get a little glue, you can clean that, no problem. We're good, and we'll go with the riser 2. Go with tread 3. Okay, just a little bit of adhesive here, get that. You could also hand roll this if you wanted to, but again, if you give it some nice pressure, I think you'll find that'll work out just fine. Okay, then we'll put this riser. Now, this happens to be just 3 steps for showtime, but if this were 12, 15 steps, you would probably do 2 or 3 steps at a time, complete them, and then go down and do the next. That way you wouldn't get too far ahead on your glue pattern. Wood urethane adhesive, and we'll put a couple of beads crossed here. That's what will give the strength. Okay, good there. And sometimes during construction, you notice that there's a gap in here. That's a kind of normal, just in cutting, you're going to get that. I would just fill that with the urethane adhesive. That's going to give it a little more strength. So now put on, alright, just put that right on top of there. Set that in. Set it right into that adhesive. It's always a good idea to tape the riser against the tread. Let that set up a little bit. Keep that from moving. There we go. That's good. Okay. Try to avoid traffic now for at least 4 hours, but typically overnight. So once you start the steps, overnight is where it should be. All right, we'll go on to the next one. We'll rub that in just a little bit. Let it set in there. Get it flat. As you see, it's nice and even with one another. Okay, so now you'll see this is glued right to this part, and I won't glue this, but I would go ahead and put the glue here, and what I really wanted to show was that now this piece will fit right in here the same way. The difference will be is there, that now you have floating, and you see this is the only edge you have, which is still very attractive, but it'll allow that floor to float back and forth, have the proper expansion. Okay, so you can see we kind of went through the installation techniques to install the step. We feel like measuring, the biggest tip probably was putting the seam sealer to make one plank. So you basically cut down now so that you have 1, 2, 3 pieces to be concerned about. Measuring the cuts, trying to make sure, because if you have angles to get the proper cuts, we find that easier just to measure and do. However, you see the step, but then there are some, if they're really bad and somebody chooses to do so, there's tools out there. This one happens to be a stair wizard, and it would just kind of give you an idea of how that works. And you would bring that in and you would form out the steps, and there's actually little rubber windshield like things on here, and you just set that, tighten everything down. Okay, now you'll have the exact depth and width of what you need. Now you got to be careful, because remember now we have the stair nosing on. That nosing wouldn't be on, so you have to allow for that when you're thinking about cutting it this way. So that's the only thing I would say about using a stair wizard, that if you're not prepared properly, you're going to forget that the nosing has to be accounted for. But anyway, once you do that, now you have this, and for the sake of showtime, you'll put that on the LVT. You would mark your marks, and that, after cutting, would give you your proper, you would cut that, that then would be your steps. Important to know the top step with the shim, so you have the top floors floating. Everything else is flush mount, tight, secure, V88 on the treads, a urethane, polyurethane adhesive on the nosing. Okay, after 8 hours or so, the next day we're going to come in and we're going to just remove all the tape. Everything is now cured. It'll take fully cured in a week, but in 8 hours it's firm and plenty good enough for traffic now at this point. If there is any adhesive left on the surface, especially if it's a urethane, you would use a urethane cleaner. You get any kind of little residue that might have got on during the installation. Other than that, everything is firm. Okay, to maintain the floor, something like a neutral cleaner, like an Ultra Clean from Mannington, with a fiber mop or a fiber cloth. Just go with the direction